next up we have Lisa Jeskins, who is going to be, oh, are we good? Oh, I'm going to pass little bits of technical stuff. Lisa is a fantastic freelance trainer, great reputation, but also a long-standing member of the information literacy group. And I think we've met several times at Lilac and things like that. So, so we're delighted to have her. She's going to be talking about information literacy, the information literacy, what CILIP and the information literacy group did next. So, oh, it's going to be more activities, more work for us. Loving it, loving it. If I could ask you to pop that on as well, and to repeat any questions from the audience. Just for
yes, yeah, we'll do.
Thanks, Lisa.
Good morning, everyone. Now, let me just get settled. How is everyone? Are we all comfortable? So, the IL definition, what CILIP and the information literacy did next. So, as Isla said, I'm Lisa Jeskins. I'm the Deputy Chair of the CILIP Information Literacy Group now. I was the Lilac Chair, but I stepped down last year. And last Lilac, that's when we launched the information literacy definition, this new one that CILIP and the IL group, and we had our members help us to devise the new definition. And that was launched practically a year ago, so last April. So essentially what I'm going to talk to you about today, a little bit of an introduction for those of you that might not have totally seen or read the definition, but then I'm basically going to be talking to you about what we've been doing with our time since then. Okay? So, just a reminder, like I say, that top level statement that we have for the definition of information literacy is information literacy is the ability to think critically and make balanced judgments about any information we find and use. It empowers us as citizens to develop informed views and to engage fully with society. Now, underneath this broad top-level statement, we have 5 different contexts and lenses underneath that. And they're basically what enable us to illustrate how broad information literacy is when we're talking about it. And that in itself has been really useful to us over the last year. I'm just going to go very, very quickly through those 5 different contexts. Should anybody want, we do have a brochure. It is on our website, and I have got the slides at the end. I've got some links to some of our resources about this, should anyone like to have a look at it. But the next context, or the first context, I should say, is information literacy and everyday life. So, essentially what we're talking about is the fact that these days the world seemingly revolves around online. We shop, we book our holidays, government websites, all the things that we need to do, from thinking about tax these days, from thinking about our driving licences, from thinking about all sorts of things that we might need to do with the government website. That's all online these days. And what we essentially want is thinking about how people use information literacy in this everyday life. You know, they're trying to keep their children safe online. It's something that we do every day, and that's obviously a big part of information literacy. We've also got information literacy and citizenship as one of our contexts. And essentially, we're looking at the importance of those IL skills when negotiating the murky waters of fake news and misinformation. We want people to be able to make informed choices in elections and referendums, for example. I did think about flashing up a slide of Donald Trump and Nigel Farage, but I decided nobody needed that on this beautiful morning. We've also got information literacy and education, and in fact these next 3 lenses impact on your lives all the time. This is about your work. The next 3 lenses are education, workplace, and health literacies. And if we think about it, you know, particularly the education space, that seems like a really logical place for information literacy, doesn't it? But realistically, higher education has the monopoly on this, on the understanding of it and on the work that's done in this area. But you know that students often struggle to link, you know, their information skills that they've learnt on one assignment to the next assignment. It's almost like a one-shot deal, and then we have to start all over again for the next one. And that's all very well for those of us, you know, that have come from higher education or that are working in higher education. But school and further education librarians really struggle to show how information literacy is necessary to their pupils' lives and education because it hardly features in any of the national curricula in England and Wales. Our schools rep, Sarah Pavey, at the moment is doing a fantastic job. She is analysing all of the different curricula and finding out, you know, what is that IL content? Is it real or is it simply tokenistic? But I think some of her findings have basically sort of gone some way to showing why students find that transition from school and further education to university so hard. She's also, I spoke to her on Tuesday, and I spoke to her and she was telling me how incredibly excited she is though, because she's currently analysing the Scottish Advanced Hires curriculum. And apparently it's wonderful. As far as she can tell, they've been advised by a librarian. With the workplace lens, I mean, you guys are training medical, nursing and allied health professional students all the time. They're helping them to become evidence-based practitioners in a subject area that is vast and constantly evolving. And you're adding to their graduate attributes and their employability, okay? So that's where we're thinking about when we're thinking about information literacy and the workplace, when we're thinking about this context in your context. And then, information literacy and health, now. As we have the wonderful Ruth Carlyle after the break, I'm not going to go into this in too much depth. Also, you're health and medical librarians, and I'm not. So it seems a little redundant for me to go into this in great depth. And like I say, Ruth is sharing her expertise with us after the break. And quite frankly, she's so good, we've asked her to be one of our keynotes at Lilac this year. But in terms of this new definition, we're discussing how having health literacy skills help people to make informed choices relating to the health and well-being of themselves and their families, and basically helping them to become those active partners in their healthcare. So that is a whistle-stop tour of what the definition is talking about. But what has the new definition meant for our team, ILG? I asked the team, I did a bit of a straw poll, so what kind of impact has the new definition had for you? I asked our illustrious chair, Jane Secker, and she said, for her, it's about reaching people outside the academic sector and making it clearer that IL is not about teaching referencing skills to undergraduates. It's about much more than that. And I think having the new definition gives us greater confidence to be doing all the advocacy work with a very clear and broader idea of what IL is. And Stefan, who is working just tirelessly as an advocate for IL, he said he sends it out systematically whenever he makes new contact. And so, for instance, he's passed it on to DCMS and DFE officials when he's had meetings with them. So for him, the definition has been great at helping raise awareness, and he uses it almost like an extended calling card. So that's sort of like the anecdotal side. But really, what have we been able to do since we created the new definition? Well, we've engaged with the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and more particularly with its new unit charged with addressing disinformation. Jane and Jacqueline actually wrote a blog post for DCMS for their Libraries Task Force on IL and the role of public libraries, mentioning specifically the work done by CILIP's Public and Mobile Libraries Group to upskill all public library staff in supporting library users' health information literacy. Stefan's also been invited to attend a couple of DCMS roundtables on digital and media literacy. We've met with Ofcom. We've been establishing new lines of dialogue to develop awareness of respective agendas, because actually Ofcom talks about media literacy all the time and hadn't realised that essentially we're all talking about the same thing. And in fact, we've even been able to get in on their monthly bulletins and talk to them about Lilac and other things that we're getting involved in. So something like I think we told them about the global media literacy event last October, and we had about three different events there, and we were able to advertise that with those people as well. We're also currently having meetings with the Department for Education. And again, I said earlier that this is one of the reasons that Sarah's doing all that work, looking at the different curricula. We're trying to examine that content to see what's there and how we can use that to help school and further education librarians. We also took part in a MisinfoCon event. And essentially as well, we've been getting in touch with some people that we've tried to talk to earlier and sometimes not had very much traction with. But now, interestingly, with the definition, we're starting to see movement. We're starting to see that what we're saying is making sense to people. And I think it's very much basically a sign of the times. So that's what we've actually done. We've been working very closely with CILIP. And we have this lovely and wonderful aspiration to mainstream IL. We essentially would love it if pupils left school with the 3 R's and information literacy. We'd like them to basically have 3 R's and an I, if that's okay. So we might not end up talking about information literacy. After all, as a phrase, what does it really mean to anyone apart from those people in this room? But we want people to leave school being able to think critically and to make balanced judgments about any information that they find, to be empowered as citizens to develop informed views and to engage fully with society. And yes, I did just quote the top level of the definition again to you, sorry about that. But one of the things that we had recently was Stefan, Sarah and I had a meeting with Nick Poole and Yvonne Morris from CILIP. And we discussed about what are we going to do to try and mainstream IL? What is the future of IL? And why does it need to be mainstreamed, in our opinion? Well, some of the things that we were talking about is we want to avoid negative outcomes on a global scale and maximise the positive outcomes. We want to restore public faith in democracy. Bit of a tough ask, possibly, at the moment. We want to restore trusted expertise. I know. But we also want to avoid social and economic inequality. We actually got down to the very nitty-gritty of what is the worst thing that could happen if you don't have information literacy skills. And actually, we actually came down to one of the worst things that can happen if you don't have information literacy skills, or in fact, what I'm really talking about is health literacy skills, is death, actually. Which means it's massive. That's a huge scale that we're talking about there. We also talked about our audiences. So if we're mainstreaming, who are we trying to get to? Well, we actually thought about our sector to start with. Because one of the things that we found as a member of the information literacy group is information literacy doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to everybody. And I know I've been at Umbrella, to show you how long ago that was, and I've had public librarians coming to me and saying, "Oh, information literacy, do I do that?" And obviously I was like, every day, probably more than me. And that's that. It is a little bit of an odd, jargonistic term. So it is thinking about getting it broader. So we thought about, well, okay, so if we're thinking about our sector first, what are we going to do? And we talked about embedding it further into the PKSB, and we talked about library schools. Can we get some of this stuff at that more basic level? Because I know when I was doing some research into various things and seeing what IL content there is in library schools, there's only a couple of library schools that actually include this as a main option. Some of them include them as options, but it's not part of the main curriculum. We're also thinking about public librarians, because they have a public library skills strategy. Can we get in there? And we're also thinking about school librarians. And then we're thinking about, well, if we're thinking about external stakeholders, where do we go there? Well, okay, so we need the education space, but sometimes in the broadest sense of that, so not just that formal learning that we're all involved in, but informal, lifelong learning, adult education, all of those sorts of things. But we also want to get to teachers, school managers, governors. Can we contact the Chartered College of Teaching? Can we think about the unions? Can we think about Ofsted? What about personal, social, health and economic association? That seems like it could be a good fit as well. And the government departments, which I was talking about earlier, such as DCMS and DFE. And if those are the audiences, how do we actually get our conversation across? You know, how do we get people thinking about information literacy? And some of the things we talked about was looking for funding to train school librarians to deliver information literacy and evaluate the impact of that, because that's the thing at the moment that's difficult for school librarians as well. It's difficult at the moment to show a big body of this works, this is what's happening, this helps with retention and going on to further education. We also thought we could build IL awareness into QTS training. We thought about raising the profile of IL through the CILIP conference, which we are going to do again, but also, you know, can we get more information, more articles into the Information Professional magazine? We talked about the fact that there's an Ofsted consultation at the moment and that we need to be a part of that consultation. And we're basically working with the School Libraries Group to get information to Ofsted. But also, we want to liaise with and collaborate with other special interest groups like ourselves, because we feel there must be massive amounts of overlap where we can help each other. So that's one of the things we're going to try and do as well, is look for those crossovers and see if we can be of benefit to those other SIGs. So that's our idea, the 3 Rs and an I. Coming back to health literacy, obviously. Obviously, you all teach IL skills pretty much every day, I imagine. If you think about the fact you're undertaking systematic reviews or you're giving systematic review training, you're thinking about giving students confidence to use those databases and teaching them how to think critically. But how can you use this definition in your work? I know I was speaking to our health rep, Pip Duval, and she said that one of the ways that she uses it is as a hook to explain why it's important for your training programmes and why it's relevant to everybody in this really broad sense as well, not just for health literacy and not just for passing those assignments. She also said as well that she might be the IL expert, but she deals with non-experts every day. And for her, this document is massively helpful because it basically gives her a case for her training, but also for literature research services that she provides as well. The other thing that we hope and that we would really love to think is that this definition makes the case for information literacy and health literacy being those key life skills. So, I've obviously passed those post-it notes out, and I would like your help, because that's what we would like to see. I'd like you to talk to the person next to you for a few minutes and just have a think about, how do you think the new CILIP IL definition can help or inform your work? Okay? Off you go. Talk to the person next to you, share some ideas. And I've given you post-it notes because I'd quite like to have the answers at the end, if that's okay. Okay. I was just going to say, if you could, because it sounds like there's all sorts of really interesting conversations going down there, so if you could write them down on post-it notes, I'd be absolutely delighted, because I think there's something there that we can really use and help. It'll help to focus what we're doing and the sorts of things we're trying to create. So, is anyone willing to share the sorts of conversations that they were having? Has anyone got any ideas about how this new definition can help them with their work?
We were talking about a lot of students I deal with, mature students, are quite scared.
Yes.
The return to learn, whether to actually start them looking for academic information by starting them thinking, okay, book a hotel.
Yes.
Where do you look? What decisions do you make? If you go on TripAdvisor, do you just look at the last review, which was awful because it's something after what do you freebie? Or do you look at the last review, actually starting them from that point and then say, right, it's not that different when you're looking for academic information.
I think it's a really great idea, that as well, because it shows them that actually as well, I was talking about that thing where they think, oh, well, this is for this assignment and this is for this assignment. It shows them, doesn't it, how actually these skills are all the way through their life, and also gives them a bit of confidence in the whole, oh, we kind of do that already, don't I?
It's not that much different.
No.
So I'm actually going to do that next time.
Brilliant.
Give me a lesson plan.
Anyone else?
Present it at the next event.
Anyone else?
It's maybe saying the same thing, maybe to a certain extent, but it's about the critical thinking aspect of it.
Yeah.
I focused on in particular, that you can't just go away and for your academic assignment and Google search. And
Yeah.
you need to think more critically about it.
Yeah, lovely, thank you.
What kind of, so we were talking about after the university, so kind of leaving people with knowing what they're kind of, what they're going to have access to and what they're going to be able to use professionally once they've left university, but also talking about the responsibility of they have now had this training on critical thinking and on looking at sources and kind of trying to work out how reliable they are and all the rest of that and where to get information from. And actually there's a kind of social responsibility they can take outside of university,
Absolutely.
wider than their professional kind of sphere, and try and sort of spread the knowledge a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, lovely
Especially,
idea.
Like, there's so many kind of things in the news that you could have quite an influence on in your social circle, like lots of misinformation around like trans rights and
Yeah.
sexual rights and like all
Absolutely.
kinds of things that they could apply that knowledge to.
Yeah, absolutely. And also thinking about, again, I know I mentioned it before, but the people that you're training have to be evidence-based practitioners, and they have to keep up to date, don't they? Yeah. Anyone else? Sorry.
I never thought I would end up saying this, but I've used it with students. I never thought that anything that comes from our professional body we would be able to use with students. But
My
actually,
God!
because there have been a couple of programs that have got me in to do a series of things, and I've been able to use this at the beginning to basically help them understand why have so many hours of my
Yeah.
precious time
Yeah.
being taken up by this librarian who isn't a physiotherapist, is never going to be a physiotherapist,
Yes.
has never even been to a physiotherapist. So, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
They get it. And we've had conversations
I was going to say, I'm like that. Oh, be still, my beating heart. It's so exciting to hear. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Well, essentially, that's the bit at the end. Anyway, but yes, I'm there. We'll get there. Sorry.
Well, it's kind of a bit linked to what was just said. A lot of the people that we're dealing with are either going to be already working as healthcare professionals, or they're training to become sort of public-facing healthcare professionals.
Yeah.
So if you can tie this definition to the sorts of questions that they're going to get to patients that may come in with poor quality information, and
Yeah.
have not got the skills to sort through this, maybe you can make the case for that and the fact that they're going to have to be evidence-based and sorting through various types of information
Yeah.
to communicate with their patients.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you. I'm sure there's so much more knowledge around this and ideas in the room. I would like to just finish by a little bit of a call for help, as I've said, for case studies. I do apologise about my very US-centric Uncle Sam here, but unfortunately, quite frankly, Lord Kitchener was a little fuzzy, and I didn't think he was as beautifully resolute, shall we say, as this particular image. But one thing that struck me when I was reading Ruth's abstract is that she discusses the risk of info-lit being seen as an extra and about passing assignments, a struggle we librarians face time and again, and something that we at ILG are working really hard to try to change, and something that we hope that this new definition can help us with. As you know, we're living in interesting times. Fake news, Donald Trump and Brexit. Although sometimes it can feel like we're all going to hell in a handbasket, it seems that in the midst of the trauma, there are real opportunities for us talking to people about what we do and how we can help develop critical thinking, raising people's awareness of how information is used and increasing their understanding of the world around them. We all know that it's vital that people can work out if politicians are lying to them, or whether committing to a juice diet can really cure your cancer. But if we think about the consequence of all of this misinformation and fake news, there are groups and government units being set up all over the world at the moment to look into issues of misinformation and how to combat it. It feels as though, in a slightly depressing way, this is an incredible opportunity for us. Because as librarians, we're perfectly placed to do this work. And in fact, almost like we are the group. You know, you keep setting up these new units. Well, actually, we'll come to us, and we will come to you, and we will talk about what we can do. And that's why we're suddenly getting traction with DFE and DCMS, because they're starting to think, oh, okay, you're doing that thing. Excellent. Yes, let's talk to that, because they now understand essentially what we've been banging on about for ages and why we've been trying to get meetings with them, which is incredibly hard, by the way. So essentially, I'm thinking about the definition, and in fact, the fact that we've got the push for health literacy that Ruth will be talking about later at the moment, we could use that as a key tool for starting to get people to think differently and to start seeing information and health literacy as life skills. So how do we get our message out there? How do we get people to see that the thing they're worrying about, this thing that they are starting to create these groups about, already has a skilled professional workforce that can do the job for them? So, essentially, the bit where I'm saying I'd like your help is that we'd like to ask for some of those case studies. Because what we're trying to do is, we've got the definition, but in some ways that could be seen as still quite abstract, couldn't it? We'd like to see some real practical examples of how we can illustrate the definition in action. To again, make some of those things feel more concrete. And okay, particularly if you think about just new professionals, well, how does that affect this? And how have people used it? So we're really thinking about where you've made a difference, where you've empowered people, and providing those case studies so we can get some really useful examples for people to read and to then be able to use in their work. And if you have got any and you're willing to do some work for us in this way, please get in touch with me. So, I have got some definition postcards. They're on the I keep saying it the wrong way around, UHMLG stand where the sponsors are. We also have lots of different resources, and obviously you'll be getting these slides at the end of the day, so you can link through to some of our PDF contact there. And obviously they've got a Creative Commons license on them, so obviously you're free to print these out. So that's some of the information and the resources that you can use yourself. And also thinking about the group, coming to Lilac, thinking about, well, actually, I'm involved in this special interest group. I can see where we've got some crossover. All of those things would be fabulous. You can also choose information literacy as one of your groups, can't you? So, thank you, everyone. Does anyone have any questions? We've got time.
Yes, we have time. Thank you. Information literacy can help you not be dead. Catchphrase, it's brilliant. But not so soon. I think it's probably needs a caveat, but
Can you imagine the picture? No.
Lisa, that's been fantastic. Yes, any questions? Rick?
Yeah, it's really good that you're getting traction with government departments where they're taking interest in this. And it strikes me, obviously, that it's really important that we deal with this with the general public.
Yes, absolutely.
So is there any evidence that the government is kind of changing its attitude to public libraries given the damage basically that's been done to
No.
public library service?
No, not at the moment, I'm afraid. And I agree completely, because it's just dreadful. When you think about the work public libraries are doing at the moment, and if you think about this misguided notion that every single person has access to the internet as well, so they've put all of the things that you have to do to be British, basically, on a website that not everyone can access. And that drives me crazy. So I'm afraid at the moment, no, there's not. But we are trying to work with what we've got, I'm afraid. I like to say, interesting times, not. So, sorry about that. Anything else?
I think it's interesting how we can all work together in different professions. I'm ex-school libraries and now health libraries, and the deprofessionalisation of
Yeah,
school libraries
absolutely.
means that even if you're helping to build a case as a school librarian for putting information literacy lessons in place, they don't want to give you that weight.
No.
So I think it's very much where all of our different professionals can come together, maybe.
I agree.
Together to strengthen.
Absolutely. And also maybe something that we can help, with the Great School Libraries course and all of that sort of thing. Also, is this another thing that we can say, this is another bit of evidence that actually proves you need a school librarian and that you need somebody that can help with this? Because, again, the impacts are, because one of the things I know Sarah's going to talk to the Scottish Government about their advanced hires curricula that she was so excited about, because she says there must be some impact evidence there that shows students carrying on and students, managing to get through, the whole time at university and all of that sort of thing. And so that information could also help trickle down, if you see what I mean, to that school librarian thing. I know, but yeah, I think that whole thing, I think for me it's the idea of us all working together, because we all do this stuff in smaller or greater extents. You know, I always try to explain to people when I was dealing with new professionals that realistically, even you one-to-ones, somebody coming to ask a question, that's all information literacy for me. So, but then it would be, there's a reason I work for this group.
I'm going to refer you onto the slides from our Brighton event last summer, where we had primary school teachers talking about the skills that they were teaching their students in terms of information literacy and awareness, and there was a school librarian who was presenting there as well. So have a look at the slides there too, as well as all the information that Lisa's had a look at.
Lovely.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you, Helen. What good work.